It is a real thrill for us today on the Chicago Sports Podcast. Kind of a different day here as I get to, this is my first time ever getting to host a show at CHGO solo.
Wow, this is a deal here.
I mean, it has been my dream to kick Braggs out to, no, not necessarily Hogue, but, this is like I get to do this by myself, and I get to bring you a former Chicago Bear all at the same time. As, yes, we've got a special guest here today as I welcome in my friend Al Harris, good old number 90, first-round draft pick, the Chicago Bears, 1979, a part of the 80s Bears, the greatest era in Bears history, and, of course, wrapped up his tenure with the Eagles, went to Arizona State. But, Al, I want to start at the top here. We're going to talk all the Walter Payton and the Jim McMahon and Buddy Ryan and Mike Ditka, your journey, the whole thing. But you are listed, apparently, as one of the greatest players in the history of the state of Maine, which I didn't know before I was doing my Al Harris research before this podcast. Like, you were born in Maine, and you didn't spend a ton of time there, but you get credit for that, Al. From Maine to ASU to the Bears.
Well, I didn't know that. That's great. That's a great honor. I lived there only 2 years, but hey, my parents put me there. I had nothing to do with it, so I feel great. I feel honored to be the greatest player in the history of Maine, at least up to this year. We'll find out who's in the league now. So
yeah, well, I just really appreciate guys who get to your level and what their journey was to get there. How did you develop A, the work ethic, B, the belief, C, what were the opportunities that came along? Where was the luck involved with who you connected with that helped you get there? All these things play a part in getting to, reach the highest level. How would you underline like your early years as you're making your way and pick? I don't know if you just played football. We used to play basketball together at the old multiplex, so you have some hoop talent too. Like how did you and when did you decide that football was going to be your thing, and when did you start to believe that, hey, I can do this?
Well, actually, my dad was in the Air Force, so we lived in multiple states. And when I was around 5 or 6 years old, we moved to West Virginia. And my dad was a big football fan, and my mom wasn't. So he wanted someone to sit by him and watch football with him. So he pulled his little 5-year-old son next to him, and we watched the Cleveland Browns back in the day of Jim Brown and Frank Ryan and Gary Collins. Man, I could probably name the whole roster because I was a big fan of the Browns when I was little. And Jim Brown was kind of my motivation to be in the NFL. I was like many kids. I wanted to be someone who handled the ball, and I wanted to be a running back. I knew I couldn't be a quarterback, but I wanted to be a running back, a receiver, and that sort of thing, just like many kids do at that age. And then, go ahead.
No, I was just going to throw in that and it's embarrassing or controversial maybe to admit this on a CHGO podcast, but I came from a Jim Brown family. Good old Freddie Carman, Marshall High School, Western Illinois, running back, linebacker back in the day, playing in the 40s. Jim Brown is the greatest. I mean, it was Jim Brown, and then it was Gale, and then Walter. But Jim Brown was the first in the Carman family. So I just like you saying it. It's interesting.
Well, he'd be equivalent today to Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he was the emblem of the National Football League back then. So So from there, we moved to multiple states, and then we moved to New Jersey. And I would play like tackle football in the backyard in the street. That's what we used to do back in those days. Back at that time, I was more of a baseball fan. Baseball was kind of like the number one sport back then, and football was kind of coming up, but it wasn't as advertised as baseball. And the reason why baseball was a big thing to me because there were some African-American superstars that they had in baseball, a lot more. We had Willie Mays and all of them, a lot of more minorities back then. So I was a little more attracted to baseball. but football started to come up. And so when I got to high school in Jersey, I was a freshman, and the reason I actually tried out for football was a dare. It wasn't something like, oh, I want to be an NFL player. It was like my friends, we dared each other to try out for freshman football. So when I get there, they don't put me on running back because my size and all that. They put me at offensive guard. And I'm like, offensive guard? I don't want to play offensive guard. And so I had this kind of real garbagey attitude. I wasn't working hard. I wasn't trying to study the playbook. I was making all kinds of mistakes in practice and stuff. So I had this freshman coach named Tony Petrillo. I love him to pieces. He was a foundational piece for me as far as being a football player. He gave me some really tough love. We had our first scrimmage, and my dad came out there in his Air Force blue uniform, had a bunch of his guys that were sitting there with Air Force, uniforms, sitting out there watching his son's first scrimmage. And because I didn't study the plays, I went the wrong way, and I ran into the guard that was pulling this way, and I went this way, and we looked like Keystone Cops. So Coach Petrillo, he wasn't happy with that at all. He cussed me out and kicked me off the field. Wow. I was the only player in that whole scrimmage that got cussed out and kicked off the field. So I came home and I was, oh, Mom, the coach was so mean to me. He cussed me out and kicked me off the field. And you know how moms are. They're protective of their babies. She's like, go ahead and quit, son. Don't let that man be mean to you like that. And so my dad, being an Air Force guy, my dad was no prisoners kind of tough. And he said, he goes, I guess you weren't ready for that commitment. Oof. And the word commitment stuck to me. And I was like, I've never quit in anything before. I said, I'm not quitting now. So this is going to be very childish. You're going to laugh. But I went back to the team and changed my attitude because I wanted to stuff it in the coach's ear that when he set the roster, I was going to quit on my terms. And that's how silly that was. So I go back and I'm playing offensive guard. Now I'm listening to the plays and stuff because I don't want to get embarrassed. I don't want to get that happen to me again. So all of a sudden they started noticing my athletic skills. They said, man, we should put this guy on defense. So they put me on defense. And then one day I was dominating in practice. Didn't even know. I wasn't consciously aware I was dominating in practice. But the coach put a guy in front of me, goes, Harris, and at the time I was third team. And he goes, if you can knock this guy back, you can start. Like he went like 5 yards behind the guy. So it was kind of like a one-on-one drill. And he stood behind the offensive lineman. He said, if you can knock him back, you can start. And I went, start? I was thinking about quitting. And I was like, forget this, man. I'm going to go after this. So I ended up dominating the guy and I ended up starting. And so the school that I went to was Rancocas Valley Regional High School in Mount Holly, New Jersey. The reason why I'm mentioning that school is that's the same high school that Franco Harris went to.
Wow.
And Franco Harris's younger brother, Pete, and I were very, very good friends. So we were probably two of the top players on our team. And we watched Franco with the immaculate reception and all that stuff. And we felt like we caught the ball. I mean, because it was like our homeboy, we're proud, we're all freshmen or sophomore. I think we might have been freshman or sophomore. And so after that, my dad gets orders to transfer, and we transfer out to Hawaii. So we go out to Hawaii. I'm thinking, does Hawaii even have a football team? I wasn't happy about going to Hawaii because I felt like we had a really good nucleus in Mount Holly. And so I go out to Hawaii and I start doing really well there. I end up being the player of the year, all-state my senior year. And back in those days, I don't know if you remember this, if you're old enough to remember this, but they used to have the super teams, which would go out. It would be the two Super Bowl teams that would go out to Hawaii every year. And they would compete against each other in like unusual events like kayaking and bike racing and stuff. And it was shown on ABC TV. I think it was ABC, I'm pretty sure, ABC Sports. So Pittsburgh would win a lot. So they would come out there almost every year, the Steelers, back in the mid-70s. So my dad goes to me one day and he goes, hey, he said, Franco Harris wants to talk to you. And I was like, yeah, right, Dad. You know, because I never had Franco's number, you know, or anything. And I am this punky high school senior. Why would Franco Harris want to talk to me? So, and I thought my dad was bluffing. And so my dad insisted, and I called up, and it was Franco on the line. And I probably almost wet my pants, you know, because it was Franco Harris. And so we went to meet with him, and you know, back in those days, you didn't have all the social media, obviously, and Hawaii was kind of isolated. You didn't get much, you know, pub for high school players in Hawaii back then. And I wanted to go to Penn State because Franco went there. So Franco, we gave him some articles. He gave it to Joe Paterno. Joe Paterno sends me back a really nice thanks but no thanks letter because he had, you know, Penn State recruited top guys back then. And so I ended up going to Arizona State with Frank Kush. And I don't know if you knew about Frank Kush, but Frank Kush is a college Hall of Fame coach. Very tough, very mean. I don't see how he would have coached today. I don't think the kids could have taken away he coached. But I went there, became All-American. So did you want me to stop for a second?
No. I'm loving listening to you, Al. My takeaway so far is like ton of credit to your dad. There was a discipline there that you were kind of, and I'm sure your mom was in there too, but there's a discipline in there that you had to live up to. There was some level of pride that you instilled early in your performance, and you know, you chose going to college. You didn't shy away from somebody who was going to be intense and probably helped get the best out of you. So you were ready to come into the NFL as you were the number 9 overall pick. By the way, the Bears have the number 9 overall pick. Connections to Al Harris here in 2024. But you know, it served you by going to ASU. There's no doubt.
Yeah, you brought up a great point, which I forgot to mention, Mark, in a little more detail about my dad. My dad being in the military, there was no excuses. There was no any type of excuse. And my dad was always one of those types that would say, I might say in a high school game, I might have 4 sacks, you know, 8 tackles, 2 strip fumbles, and my dad would focus on the plays I did wrong. And we would get in fights in the car, not physical fights, but verbal, in the car. It's like, why are you picking on that? You know, but he always wanted me to be the best. And so when I went to to Arizona State, it was the same way. And so went through Arizona State. My freshman year, I was very fortunate. Our team ended up being second in the country that year behind Oklahoma. We were 12-0, but we were in a WAC conference, and Oklahoma was in the Big 12. So we had beat Nebraska. They had beat Nebraska, but they beat them by a bigger score. So even though Oklahoma had 1 loss that year, they were named the national champions, even though we were undefeated. But that was a great experience. Played with Mike Haynes, who's a Hall of Famer. He was a teammate of mine. John Jefferson, really good wide receiver there. Larry Gordon. Sorry about that.
No worries. This is live. This is live podcasting. You're allowed to get calls, Al. Don't. It's all right.
Yeah, Mark gets them all the time.
My daughter calling me. My daughter. I should have told her.
Say hello. It's all right.
But anyway, oh boy. Let's see. Hold on a second. I'm trying to get where you're at now. There you are. Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry about that. So anyway, I wasn't anticipating that. So anyway, went to Arizona State, finished my senior year there. And then, you know, the NFL team started looking for me. And so Jim Finks, who was the general manager for the Bears at the time, came out to see me. And I didn't know anything about the Bears except Walter Payton. I didn't know a thing about the Bears because the Bears weren't very good. You know, we got all the Dallas games, you know, all the other teams, more the warm weather teams that were successful. I think San Diego is up and coming because my teammate John Jefferson went there. So I didn't know anything about the Bears. So Jim Finks comes out to visit me, and he's saying, you know, I want to make you one of the Bears' top picks, you know, and he goes, we're thinking about drafting you at, you know, number 4. Now, what's funny about this whole thing was you didn't have the medium of knowing who the other players the Bears were interested in or anything else like that. And the other thing I didn't know is that the Bears had 2 draft picks. So the year before that John Jefferson, my teammate at Arizona State, the Packers wanted him, but he didn't want to go to the Packers. So he told the Packers not to draft him. So he ended up getting drafted by San Diego. So I'm leading up to something. You're going to see where I'm going with this. So I come to the Bears, and Finks comes out, and Frank Kush goes, I've been here 20 years, and this is the first time a GM's ever come out to see one of my players. This is a big thing, Hal. Now, you have to realize I'm 21 years old, very immature. So Jim Finks brings me out for a visit. So I come out to Chicago. Now, this was before, the original Hallis Hall. Do you remember where the first Hallis Hall was in Lake Forest? I don't know if you remember.
Sure.
And it's that wasn't even built. They were in some kind of, best way to describe it, looked like an old high school complex or something. And so I come out there, and I realize I went to high school in Hawaii, going to college at Arizona State. I come to Chicago in March. Okay. So the temperature is crazy. We go downtown. It's all messy. It's raining. I think the wind chill must have been like 20 degrees. How people in Chicago are a little friendly and honk at you and, do different stuff to you downtown. So here I am, this suburban kid in this really protective environment. All of a sudden I'm in this big city, and the team wasn't good. It was cold. The facility was really bad. So very few people know about this, but I'm going to bring it out in public for the first time. Jim Finks would vouch for me if he was still here, bless his soul. But Jim Finks calls me and he says, so are you all ready to go to be here with the Bears? And I said something, I try to say it in a real nice way, but I try to copy my teammate John Jefferson. So I try to say it in a real polite way of, hey, I really appreciate you wanting me here, but I just would prefer to go to another place. So Jim Finks cusses me out. He lays into me. And I don't blame him looking back, you know what I'm saying? He was like, what's wrong with this stupid kid? So Jim Finks hangs up, calls me back probably an hour later, apologizes. And he says, that just really caught me off guard. I've been in the league a long time. No player's ever said that to me. And he said, well, okay, we won't draft you with the 4th pick, but that doesn't mean we won't draft you. So in my head, I'm thinking, what's he talking about? I'm not going to be here in the 2nd round. I'll be gone. But remember, you didn't have all the big things of the draft like we do now. I didn't know the Bears had 2 picks. The 2nd pick was number 9. So comes up to the draft, sitting there in my room. There's no ESPN or anything that you can watch. We're just sitting there waiting. Get a phone call. I hear the voice, Jim Finks. And I'm going, what? What are you doing calling me? And he goes, well, we picked you. And I go, what do you mean you picked me? Because I knew the 4th pick had already went by, and that was Dan Hampton. So I go, what do you mean you picked me? I said, didn't you pick Dan Hampton? He goes, yeah. He goes, well, we also picked you. And I go, wait a minute. He goes, yeah, we had a pick at number 9. I went, oh. Now, thank God there was no TV. Thank goodness. Because, oh my gosh. Oh, I look back at myself and I kind of want to go, psh. But what was really funny about this was Fink said, okay, don't say anything. If you say anything and you let the fans know you don't want to be there, they're going to be all over you. So I said, okay. So I get in there, and so me and Ricky Watts were there. Hamp couldn't get in, I think, because there was a snowstorm that prevented him getting out of Arkansas. But me and Ricky Watts were there, and we had a suite up in the downtown Chicago hotel somewhere. And so that, you can go in the door between the 2 suites back and forth. So I was up all night. So I'm sleeping. It's 10 at night. And Ricky Watts comes in and wakes me up and says, Al, they're going to talk about the draft. They're going to talk about the draft. I said, okay. So I kind of getting up like this, looking around. And I look, and I don't know if it was Johnny Morris, or because Johnny Morris was, I think, doing broadcasting back there. And then back at that time. So they show the fans' reaction. I guess they had it in a hotel or something, hotel lobby. And they had I think the PR guy name was Ted Harris. It sounded like my name, but it was spelled differently, like a European kind of spell. I can't remember how to spell his last name. But he was the PR guy, or the Bears sports information or whatever director. So he comes up all proud and he goes, Chicago Bears pick number 4, defensive end from Arkansas, Dan Hampton. And the crowd in the hotel goes, boo, we want Winslow. See, they wanted Kellen Winslow out of Missouri, which he's a great player, Hall of Famer, obviously. So now I'm like this. I'm looking up like, oh, shoot. What are they going to do when I'm introduced? So Ted Harris comes back up the second time, and he's kind of coming up kind of sheepishly the second time. And he goes, the Bears pick 9, defensive end from Arizona State, Al Harris. And the crowd goes in unison. I'm not lying, Mark. They go like this. Who? Boo! So I talked to Finks the next day. I go, these people don't want me here. Why did you draft me? They don't want me here either. But that's how that's how it started off for me getting drafted by the Bears.
That is an honest young, didn't know the beauty that was in front of him, Al Harris, which is a perfect segue, by the way, as we jump into your Bears career. Let me just tell the fine people, and thank you for listening to the CHGO Sports Podcast about Prize Picks. Football season may be over. The action on the floor is just heating up. Football season gone, but tournament season is here, as is the fight for the playoff home court that's going on as well. No shortage of high-stakes basketball moments this time of year. Get in on the excitement with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you can turn your hoops knowledge or any of your sports knowledge into serious cash. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. So $10 can turn into $1,000. NBA, NHL, college basketball. Lots of options there for you wherever you think your expertise is. Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. It's the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy. I know you want to get involved in this. It's just you against the numbers. You're going to pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections. Watch those winnings roll in. You can see the future. You can make your money. Go to prizepicks.com/CHGO. Use that code CHGO for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/CHGO. Use that CHGO code. Pick more, pick less. It is just that easy. Prizepicks.com. And Lawrence, you know.
Yeah, I do. I do know.
It's very important to look good, feel good, be clean. Do it with CD1 Price Cleaners. Customers save 30% of their dry cleaning bill by switching to CD1 Price Cleaners. Other cleaners charging a different price for every garment type. If you've got an Al Harris jersey number 90 and you want it cleaned, do it at CD1 Price Cleaners. They're going to charge you one low price for any garment. That's right, sports jerseys, same low price. Fast turnaround. You can have the order ready the same day or the next day. They send you a text when it's ready. So it's just a very convenient, easy way to do your dry cleaning, your wash and fold laundry, your blankets, your comforters, your tailors, your alterations, your leather cleaning, your rug cleaning, all of it. This is what you do. chgo.cd1.com. And once there, you can pick from an in-store coupon or online pickup and delivery coupon options. All right. Al, you're a rookie. Dan Hampton was the number 4 pick. Walter Payton's in the room. Neil Armstrong's still the coach. We're 3 years away from Mike Ditka showing up. But that was a good football team. You guys won 10 games your rookie year. What are your first memories of being on the field? And there's this 34 cat that's running around here with the fro and all the talent.
Well, before I get to Walter, I have to tell you Alan Page. So you have to realize Alan Page, I idolized Alan Page as a football player, especially a defensive lineman. You know, being Defensive Player of the Year, I think he was the first one. He might be the only one that was like the Player of the Year playing a defensive player. But anyway, I looked up to Alan Page, but the rookies, they would keep us in a different, they call it the dungeon. So, and we had moved into the new Hallis Hall building that they were building it in the summer or in the spring when I didn't see it. So now I come to the new Hallis Hall building, which is not the one they have now, obviously. But they have us in the basement, so we called it the dungeon, and the veterans were up in the other area. But I remember I got hurt my first week or something in Atlanta, and I had a knee injury, and I was out for like 8 weeks. So I really wasn't even around the team. I got hurt so fast my rookie year, and I didn't really get to know Allen. And so once the season started and I came back in the locker room, because I wasn't even, back then when you had knee injury, it took a while to recover. So I got back there around the 5th or 6th week in the season, and I was sitting next to Alan Page, and I was just staring at him like this. And so he kind of looking at me like this, and he goes, yeah, what's up, Brooke? I go, you're Alan Page. He goes, yeah. He goes, I go again, you're Alan Page. He goes, I know who I am, Brooke. And I go, no, you don't understand. You were one of my men on my electric football set in 6th grade. And all the guys are listening, and they busted up laughing, And he's like, oh, thanks a lot, Brooke. He said, that'll happen to you one day. So then Walter was just, he's the greatest football player I've ever seen. I saw that guy in practice kick 70-yard punts, 40-yard field goals, just messing around. I mean, everybody knows about his running talent, but the guy threw, I think, 9 touchdowns in the NFL from the halfback position. He threw 2 touchdowns against New Orleans that were over 40 yards to Willie Gaul in one game in 1983. He could block like an offensive lineman. Well, if Walter Payton was a defender, he would have been a Hall of Fame safety. I mean, there was nothing that guy couldn't do. To me, he was the modern Jim Thorpe. And the thing that was so awesome about Walter Payton to me was his energy. The dude never got tired. I mean, we had a lot of hitting during practice and stuff. Now, again, we weren't allowed to hit Walter like we could hit everybody else, in fairness. But nevertheless, our practices were hard. And Walter he just had this ball of energy. He was a prankster. There were times that he would ball up he wore all those socks. If you remember the socks he wore up, and he would ball them up and he would throw it at guys. He'd hit me in the head, other guys walking across the locker room. He was just a prankster. But in my mind, no question in my mind, Walter Payton was the greatest player in the history of the NFL as far as a football player.
I love it. And so, okay, I'm just trying to understand. You couldn't hit him super hard in practice, but yet you guys back then, you practice way different than they're practicing today. So,
yes.
like what would that look like on a daily basis as far as, I'm just trying to envision what the scrimmages were.
Oh, my gosh. It was live. I mean, it was basically, we were scrimmaging every day. I mean, most of the guys will tell you, I mean, my goodness, if I played nowadays, I could have played 15, 16 years easy. And I played 11, and we were beating the daylights out of each other in practice. It was physical. It was long. It was like 8 weeks of hitting, and the coaches back in those days believed in hitting every day. It was really tough. I mean, you're going against Jimbo Covert and Keith Van Horn and Tom Thayer. You're going against these were stud offensive linemen now. I mean, not at the beginning. The Bears had to build up to that point, but they were really good offensive linemen.
So what do you remember about the Buddy Ryan letter where, that was detailed that when the Bears are looking for a head coach and Ditka ultimately is going to come in, but you guys apparently got together in a room and wrote a letter to Papa Bear and said, hey, we want Buddy to stay. Tell me what you remember about that.
Oh, my goodness. It's like a snapshot from yesterday. Well, first of all, you got to realize George Halas, he didn't come in on a regular basis because he was an owner and he kind of kept his distance to let the coaches coach. But when he came in, it was like I know a lot of people wouldn't know this commercial, but it was like the E.F. Hutton commercial when he talks, people listen. And so when Halas came in, guys would be messing around, teasing and stuff. Even Buddy was in there, another coach. Halas came in, everybody was quiet as a church mouse, man. They were like this, sitting real seriously. So when we got to that point, our defense was young and improving. I think our 1981 draft, we had a lot of really good players out of there. I think Singletary came out of there. I think there were a bunch of defensive backs. I think Jeff Fisher, Todd Bell, Leslie Frazier, Reuben Henderson. I think we had a lot of really good young players. If I think that's around that time, hopefully my memory's not escaping me here.
No,
but we had a young and upcoming team.
Van Horn was 11th overall. Mike went 38th. Ken Marjoram was a decent receiver. Jeff Fisher's in there. Yep. Okay. Todd Bell.
Yeah. So we had a really good, solid draft, and our defense was coming. Because Dan and I were starting to mature. You were just getting Otis. Otis was a young, Otis Wilson. So you think about that. That foundation was being built right then in '81 defensively, and Buddy was such a phenomenal play caller. And I just want to share this about Buddy Ryan. Buddy was not afraid to be unconventional. He was not afraid to put a 6'5", 255-pound defensive end like Al Harris and have him in a slot bumping, running Ahmad Rashad down the field. I mean, he would have us in unusual situations. He would have linebackers covering receivers. We would practice. We would do it in practice. We would go out there and cover the wideouts all the time because he didn't want to change his personnel. So he was but he would teach us how to cover, and so he would teach us where our help was coming from, and what throws were hard for a quarterback, not to give him an easy throw right down the middle, make sure you're inside out on him, and certain things like that. So he taught us things. And the biggest thing that Buddy was so good at, he believed in us, and it's so important for players to know that a coach believes in them, especially a young player. And don't get me wrong. I mean, he would get on you like crazy, but we knew he cared, and we knew he loved us to the end of the earth. But he always used to have this saying, though. He goes, fellas, now remember Rex and Rob Ryan, right? So they were ball boys back then. Now, you know who our ball boys back then were? Rex and Rob Ryan, Duke Tobin, and Jeff Ireland. You know who Duke Tobin and Jeff Ireland are? They're executives in the National Football League. We had like an all-world ball boy team back then. So that's what's so funny. I don't know if a lot of people know about that. But, it was just – so Gary Fensick and Alan Page were the two main guys. Alan was retiring that year, so it wasn't going to benefit him. But Gary and Alan were the ones that kind of put that together, and we all signed it, hoping to keep Buddy here because we knew we had this nucleus. We knew we were going to be good, and George Hallis listened to us. Then, the thing with Ditka came up.
So let's focus on Hallis for a second here because he's revered and, founder of the NFL. His statue, of course, is outside Soldier Field. It's outside Hallis Hall. He's George Hallis. But he was, there's the other side of it, and he was cheap. He wanted to pay guys as little as possible. Ditka left here. And then you famously, you and Todd Bell after the 84 season, what were you making at that point, Al, if you could be, if you can share with us?
Oh, gosh. Well, let's see. Gosh, that was so long ago. I know I had a $200,000 signing bonus in '79, and my first year's salary was $60,000.
$60K.
So it probably went up, 10 a year maybe. So what, 80?
Okay.
I think I went under 100.
So you were close. You were getting close in on 100, and so the '84 Bears, you guys beat Washington in the playoffs. Which was a great win. Todd Bell with the famous hit on Joe Washington. For those who are in my demo, like the 11-year-old me, that was the nastiest hit of all time. And it was obvious you guys were coming, overly obvious. And of course, you lost to San Francisco, which McMahon's hurt, Fuller starting. They were better at that point. We give them credit.
Yeah, they were.
All that, but so. You're on the cusp. You have a good football team, but you're not getting paid right. So you end up holding out, and the Bears just don't meet you on it, and you end up not playing in '85, which I'm sure is got to bother you to this day. But what was Hallis doing at the point? What's that?
What led to it? Or are you asking
Yeah.
me what led to it?
Well, I'm just asking, like, what were
Well,
you asking for? What was he unwilling to do? I'm sure it's a ridiculous thing. I bet you weren't asking for much, and it's just going to be absurd to hear the actual details of what was going on. I'm sure you weren't holding him up for a ton of money.
Well, I'll say this. So what happened was, you have to kind of know what was happening the year before. So I was playing defensive end up through the middle of 1983. So all the defensive linemen most of the outside linebackers got hurt. So Buddy Ryan, because I was such a great athlete, threw me in at linebacker in the middle of the season. I'd never played linebacker in my life. So I was just kind of playing on raw ability and instinct, but there was a lot of things that it was foreign to me, but I'm playing it, doing the best I can. So the Bears in '84 draft Wilbur Marshall and Ron Rivera because Ditka wanted those two to take our place. So Buddy really liked me, and Buddy any rookie that would Hamp, Singletary, Otis, Buddy gave rookies the hardest time. He wasn't giving them any slack at all. And he did the same thing with Wilbur. So I played in front of Wilbur. I had a really good year that year. And so I was on the team that had 72 sacks. We were number one in the league in defense. And so Wilbur couldn't beat me out. And so I was like, hey, I should be paid at least somewhere near what he's getting paid if he couldn't beat me out. Now, that doesn't say Wilbur's not a great player. I mean, Wilbur obviously proved himself down the road. But at the time, he hadn't. So the Bears initially offered me less money than my previous contract. So what happened was, if someone offers you less money than your previous contract is opening offer, that's pretty disrespectful, right? So I kind of took the emotional bait, and I was really mad about that. And I was like, wow, they don't respect me. And then there was a situation where they were, I guess Jerry Venisi was trying to intimidate my dad into getting me to sign or something, and said, well, if he doesn't sign, he'll never play with the Bears, he'll never play in the NFL again. And so then I was like really hot. And I was like, oh, it's on now. So at that point, I lost perspective because it got personal. And you never do that in negotiation. So I wasn't expecting to miss the year. I was just standing on principle. And you have to realize at the time, I wasn't under contract. Back in those days, they had your rights. My contract was fulfilled. I had played out my contract. So it was 5 years. So I had played it out, but I had no rights. I couldn't go. There wasn't no free agency back then. So the only thing you could do is withhold your services. So that's what I did. And Wilbur got in, had a sensational year, and the rest was history. I had no idea that I was going to miss the year. I wasn't planning that at all. I wasn't thinking about that. But I was trying to stand on what I thought was right. And like I said, too, and I got offended. And I think that kind of, being a young player looking back, obviously you don't want to get that point in negotiations. You get offended because you lose perspective. So, and that's what happened.
Yeah. So you all right. You end up not playing. You end up, they're out there doing their thing. Now you got to come back and like get back in the mix and get paid. Like, how did you get your head clearer where like, okay, that's behind me and I'm moving forward. Can't relive it. Let me have the best, however many more years I can play in the NFL. And of course, you played another half a decade.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I didn't want to go back to the Bears. I was very angry at them. Mike Ditka had boasted that he won the Super Bowl without me and Todd and kind of threw it in our face during the Super Bowl. So I didn't want to play for him anymore. And so then we had this in the spring, the Bears were secretly kind of reaching out to me. Well, I'm kind of getting out. I'm getting in front of that. Sorry. Buddy Ryan had went to Philly. So I wasn't under contract. So Buddy was like, hey, we're looking to get you. We're going to try to trade for you and Todd for Philly. And I was like, okay, cool. So we're waiting and waiting and waiting. And then Buddy came back and said, and it was right before, it was like March, April, right before the draft. And Buddy goes, Big Al, he said, I got some bad news for you. We can't get you. And he says, the Bears are asking too much. He says, they're asking for like a number 1 and a number 2. And I was like, what? I wouldn't pay a number 1 and number 2 for me. You know what I mean? So it was just like prohibitive. And so then now I'm really like, man, these guys are messing with my career.
They really are.
So, I'm sitting there going like, man, what is going on? So then after that, I get a call from the Bears, and they're trying to get me to come in for minicamp. And they wanted to do a negotiation, but they wanted to do it on the sly. So I wasn't happy about doing it, but my friends kind of talked me into doing it. They're like, you got to go back in there, man. You got to find out either they'll trade you, cut you, or you play. Don't you want to play in the NFL? And I had to humble myself, put my pride down, and I said, yeah. So I went in there, and so I'm on the plane, and I'm flying in, and I'm supposed to be incognito, right? So no one knows, none of the media supposedly knows that I'm coming in town, because it's still a big story, right? So I happen to be on Doug Collins' flight. So Doug Collins was coaching at ASU. He just got the job with the Bulls. So I come out and I see all this media. I was like, what the? I said, did they pull a fast one on me? And I realized Doug Collins is there. So the media sees Doug Collins. So I'm trying to sneak around them, out the gate, so they don't see me. And I think Jeannie Morris saw me and so like, wait a minute. They start chasing me down the hallway. And, so I ended up talking with them for a couple of minutes, but I didn't talk much. But we kind of hammered it out, me and the Bears organization. It wasn't behind closed doors at that point. Now, but the cat was out of the bag. But, I had to humble myself and come back in there because they weren't going to let me play. They knew I was still too good of a player to let go. And at the same time, I wasn't going to beat Wilbur out. I mean, I'm a realist. Wilbur Marshall was outstanding. So I wanted to play for another team because I felt that I could be a starter at linebacker for another team. But, to the Bears part, I totally get why they kept me in time.
Yeah. The Wilbur part of it, it's interesting because they ended up playing hardball with Wilbur, who they didn't pay, and he ends up in Washington, and that defense wasn't the same after he left. So a lot of times people argue who was the most impactful guy on that team, and Singletary will get a ton of credit, and then Hamp's in the Hall of Fame, and now Mongo's going in, and Richard's there too. I mean, I don't know how you viewed it, but that you guys up front made it a lot easier for the linebackers for sure. I'm sure you felt it when you were playing there too. But yeah, go ahead. I'm just curious how the strength of that defense. How would you underline it?
It's interesting because I play both positions, so it's harder to play defensive line than as linebacker because defensive line, your people are pounding on you every play. Linebackers, you're kind of running in space. Now you might have more velocity hit because you're coming from a distance versus up close, but it's not nearly as physically draining as it is playing defensive line. But Jim Finks and Bill Tobin and those guys, Jim Palmer, they did such a great job of loading that team up with talent. That team was loaded. Our second team probably could have went 500. Think about it. Neil Anderson was a backup running back. We had a lot of players that were Ron Rivera, backup linebacker. We had a ton of talent. Me and Todd were backups. So there was, for at least for a couple of years, so I started starting there again later. But there was so much talent there, and just like anything else, it all starts with the general manager. And I don't care who your coach is. If your general manager's not bringing in the players, you're not going to have a chance.
No doubt. Aaron, I want to talk to you about the offense for a second here, but let me just tell everybody about Game Time. Get your tickets using the Game Time app. Download it today. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time, the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for sports, for music, for comedy, for theater events near you. Get it all. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, best price guarantee. Game Time taking the guesswork out of buying tickets. The all-in prices show you up front your total. They also do zone buys, so you can pick like, hey, I'll sit all the way up top in the corner. I don't care what row, and you end up getting an 18% roughly discount on those seats, which is an awesome way to get in for as little as possible. We also do this for you when you download the Game Time app and you create an account. If you use the code CHGO, you get $20 off your first purchase. That's right, $20 off on your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right. As I lose my voice for a second. Did you like Jim McMahon, Al? Like, what was your relationship there with the punky QB?
I like Jimmy. You know, I didn't really get to know Jimmy until we were teammates at Philadelphia, to be honest with you. I mean, I knew Jim from college because he was at BYU and he used to come down to Arizona State back in the days, you know, you're young kids and you're chasing and all that kind of stuff. So we knew each other from there. He was a punter at first, if I remember, at BYU before he became a stud at quarterback. But I didn't really get to know Jimmy that well in Chicago because he had so much stuff going on. But at Philly, he wasn't the star, and Randall Cunningham was the star. He was the backup. So us being Chicago guys, being there because Buddy I think he brought Fridge over there, Todd over there, myself, McMahon. I'm trying to think who else. I think he at least brought 5 or 6 Chicago Bears over there. But I really like Jimmy. I mean, I got along with him well. He's a different character, obviously. But I liked him. I didn't have any problem with Jimmy.
Tell me about Fridge.
Big teddy bear. That's how I picture him. He's a big teddy bear, lovable guy, a tremendous athlete for a guy his size. And I don't think people realize that. I mean, most of the time he played 330, 340, and that back in those days, that was way overweight. Now that's normal. But back in those days, that was really, Buddy would get on him a lot about his weight. And then Vince Tobin, those guys would talk to him, and he had to get his weight down. But he was a big teddy bear, lovable guy,
Were guys like super jealous of Fridge when he's getting the ball, getting in the end zone, and he's getting endorsements? He's all over the place. Coca-Cola, a zillion others that it's, I remember Coke off the top of my head, but he's making all this extra money. How did that resonate in the locker room as you remember?
I don't know. There may have been guys that I didn't know that were jealous, but I didn't feel that overtly as a team. Now, you have to realize during that time, I mean, people need to understand, if you are a winner in Chicago, you're like a Hollywood star. I mean, you're going to these top restaurants, there'll be a big long line and people will let you in front. The owners will pay your meals. You get these cars. And I mean, that's what I'm saying. And Chicago is a great sports city. My goodness. So he wasn't the only one getting deals. I mean, back then we would go and do an appearance and do a signing appearance to get $1,000 for an hour, which was a lot of money back then. And, that was for the backups. McMahon and those guys were probably making 10 to, him and Walter and those guys, who knows how much money they were making. But it got to the point it got out of control a bit during the 86 season, obviously, because it was a year after the Super Bowl. And we talked about it in the spring, about guys cutting back on their commercials and stuff. And, our coach made more commercials, I think, probably than any of the players. Mike Ditka had a lot of commercials. So that was a bit distracting for us in '86. I think guys would admit that.
Did you ever did you ever reconcile with Ditka, Al? It sounds like he's not your favorite guy in the history of the NFL.
I think, I don't know what happened with our relationship, but at the beginning, it was a lot better than it was towards the end. I think when he boasted about winning without me and Todd, really kind of set me in a different path with him, because I was one of the few players that complimented him on getting a contract the year before. And he even came to me and told me that. And I came out openly. He got an extension, after the '84 season, I think, or during it. And I was one of the few players that came out and congratulated him on it. And I felt like he didn't fight for me at all. I felt like he fought against me. So after that, I kind of looked at him differently, if that makes sense. I mean, I got along with him, but I didn't trust him, if that makes sense.
Well, and I think that if he was being honest about it, he just looking back, he had there was a big eye in Ditka at the time. I mean, he was benefiting all over the place, and I guess, on some level, at least to his wallet, to his credit. Yeah. All right.
But I don't hate the man or anything. I just, it's just different.
Yeah. I'm seeing some stuff in the chat here. Is there breaking news, Lawrence?
Jalen Johnson, apparently a deal might be done. I got to confirm that, but that's apparently
what's
happening.
Well, we here. Boy, we're yep. Well, we're getting breaking news here that Jalen Johnson deal is done. Al, 4 years. Yeah, 4 years for $76 million. 54.4 guaranteed, as they get it done
via Bleacher Report.
Jordan Schultz reporting this via Bleacher Report. We can talk currently here. We got about 5 minutes to go in the show. Your reaction to the Bears inking Jalen, and where you think they are right now, Al? What how high is up for this team in the position they're in with the number 1 overall pick and number 9, and where the defense got to at the end of the year?
I'm going to talk quick because it might take me a little bit to explain everything. But first of all, with the number 1 pick thing and Justin, I know there's a lot of division in the Chicagoland area, and first of all, I've seen Caleb play. Being out here on the West Coast, I've seen him play a few times, and man, that guy is spectacular. I mean, he I'm sure it's been talked about ad nauseum on your show, but he's a special, special player. Having said that, also look at Justin. Considering what Justin went through, a young coordinator who didn't kind of find his way, Getsy, the things that Justin went through the couple years, that would have ruined most quarterbacks. And he started to ascend right after Claypool was released. You check the records. Right after Claypool was released, he ascended. And I think I don't know this by fact, but I'm wondering if there was some distraction on his part by Claypool. So he ascends, gets hurt with Minnesota, misses 4 games, starts to ascend again. If he doesn't miss those 4 games, I don't even think this is a conversation. He would be the Bears quarterback. I really believe that. And I think what's going to happen is, I think about Steve Young. Steve Young was with Tampa Bay. I played against Steve Young. Steve Young was Justin Fields back in those days. He was very raw in passing and everything, and people were wondering if he was going to be a bust. Well, we know what happened. He went to another team. He got coached up. He became a Hall of Famer. That's what's going to happen with Justin Fields. I really believe that. I can't see him not succeeding unless he gets with a bad program. The way you do Justin is you protect him with the running game and play action. He's a play action guy. You do like the 49ers do with Purdy. You don't sit him back there in 5 wides and throw all the time. That's not his strength. You protect him with the running game, and I think you can load up with draft picks and set yourself up for many years if you did that way. But I understand both sides of the argument, though.
All right, so Al, this just leads me into the future between you, me, and CHGO, because we did a bunch on you today, and I'd love to do more because I could tell stories. It's my favorite thing to do. But we got to get you back on the Bears show to talk about the current roster with the guys. I hope you're open for that. I'd love to do it.
I'm open for that. That'd be great. I watch you guys. You guys keep me Chicago, even though I'm in Arizona now. I love watching you guys. You guys do a great job.
I appreciate the support, and one story we didn't talk about back in the day, but I was a high school kid. Al's played for the Bears, And then in the 90s, we're playing hoop together at the multiplex with the Bulls running around and former Bears running around. My guy Mo Douglas and Donnell Wolford. Jim McMahon showed up. Hey, the fridge was there. Otis knocked me across the lane one time. I'm lucky to be alive today from that experience because, 55 was, he wasn't playing around out there. He knocked the wind out of me. It was a thing. I'm like, Otis, I'm 5'10", 140. Lay off young Carm. But hey, it's a true pleasure to reconnect with you, Al. I really appreciate this time that you gave us today. I look forward to talking with you more.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's a great honor being on your show.
Oh, I appreciate it, Al. It's Al Harris. That'll conclude the CHGO Sports Podcast. If you are watching right now, I think we're about to go live on CHGO Bears Podcast. We'll get everybody together to talk about Jalen for a couple of minutes and react to that. And we're gonna have Al back over there coming up here. So I'm looking forward to that down the line. Al, be good, brother.
All right, thank you too. Take care, Mark.
The great Al Harris with us. Thanks for watching CHGO Sports Podcast.
I believe you guys are going to go live here again with some sort of pod. I don't know what's happening. It's sort of all breaking at the moment, but Carm, you might be doing another show momentarily. So good luck to your voice.
Thank you.
Am I off?
You are now. We'll see, Al. CHGO Sports, say bye.
All right.
We all silly like the mayor.